Hello, Mark Suzanne here, and we will go with Blender today. So first of all, if you are new to 3D and new to Blender, the website called blender.org, you can download the latest version of Blender. You can also download the older versions, so if you click on this download button, for example, you will find that you have the previous versions and the builds as well. So builds are the newer items, so it includes the alpha version, for example, the next one. It's not released yet. This one released recently, so everything is available and it's free and it's cross-platform. Now, before just a little advice, because it can cause some trouble, so please make sure that your operation system is updated. Also, please make sure that the graphics cards are updated before you install Blender to avoid some confusion. And if you are working on a laptop, sometimes the energy management needs to be adjusted. So when you are not plugged in, the laptops tend to save energy and turn off graphics cards or change preferences, which software can use a specific graphics card if you have a dedicated one, for example an NVIDIA graphics card, if you have a gaming style laptop or a mobile workstation. So please make sure that it is assigned to Blender, so that can cause some trouble. But anything than that, any other thing than that, there's no need to worry. It's a clean install. So here we are. This is how Blender looks, and on this bottom right corner, here's this the build number. It's not the latest, but it's quite a recent version. And we have this basic cube right in the middle. So now what you have to keep in mind, there is so many things. This is the graphic user interface, GUI or UI for short. And despite it's called graphic user interface, we have a couple icons, but most of it's text basically. And we have some menus, but the menu area is quite restricted. And what's not unique to 3D environments, but it's very strongly articulated in Blender, that we have hotkeys and shortcuts to manipulate the software. So you need to adjust yourself and get used to this, that most of the communication between you and the software is happening through hotkeys, keystrokes, you name it, with the software. Alright, so the first thing that you already see that I'm using the middle mouse. This is the wheel. I'm pressing down the middle mouse, the scroll wheel, that's the middle mouse button, and that moving the mouse away, it navigates and rotates things around. If I'm holding down the shift key, that's actually panning the whole stuff. If I'm using the scroll, that's kind of an incremental zoom. If I'm using the control, that is a kind of a smooth analog zoom. So it depends on your preferences. I like these stepping zooms, but it's depending on the situation. Alright, so there we are. Now, if you're already overwhelmed, don't worry. So anytime if you forget about something in the navigation, you can look up and look for this gizmo. So if you just want to start and fiddling around and opening a couple of files and look, you can use these. Now, here's this name. Can you read this? User perspective. It means not much. Alright, so it's not really a telling name. User perspective. What the heck is that? So we have this perspective button we can turn on and off. This is an orthographic view. This is much more like an accurate view. So, this is to say it's simple. If we turn it back on, this is a perspective view. You can go on and on. We have hotkeys for all of these, but I will tell the simplified version first. So let me show this. So I'm holding the middle mouse button and I'm holding the Alt key, and when I'm closer to view, like for example in the side view, and rotating, I'm holding the Alt key, it will snap into that view and it will tell this is right orthographic. And I'm starting rotating around, it jumps back to perspective, it rotates around and I'm holding that, and now it's back orthographic. Alright, so this is quite a neat way to change. So instead of remembering all the hotkeys or clicking in here, you can do that as well, no problem. But it's quite intuitive to use that. Rotate, hold snap, and hold Alt, and it will snap in. All right, so scroll everything else. Now, first things first, I have to explain something about the navigation. So when I'm using the scroll wheel, can you see where my mouse is? So when I'm using the scroll, it zooms in and out, but it does it a kind of weird way. So for example, if this object is on the side of my scene and I'm zooming in, it just, it falls out of range. All right, so what I can do is I can tell the software that this type of navigation, the zoom, is actually should follow where the location of my cursor is. And the other thing is rotation. So when you are rotating around the object, usually you want to keep it at focus. So rotate the object itself around. But when you are off center, this is what happens. It becomes like a turntable. It's not the best option to do. So the first thing what we will do, and this is an opportunity to show you how to adjust things in Blender. So we have this in edit mode, we have preferences. And let me click on preferences, and we have a few things here. Now right away, this is navigation, and in the navigation we can turn on orbit around selection. So what does it mean? If this was selected, and I will talk about selection just in a second, and we have this zoom to mouse position. So let me hit OK, and I will hit save preferences. This one's great, preferences saved. The reason I do it, let me explain this because it can help you in the long run. So we have this save preferences button, and we have this auto save preferences button, and as you see, it's checked in. But why I do save, even if it's check-in autosave, because if the software crashes, it may lose these settings because you're not properly shutting down the software. It may not be saved. So what I like to do is time to time, if I don't forget, I'm hitting save preferences anyways to make sure that something is off. It's my computer that I have crashes, but it may happen. Alright, so these two settings are changed, save preferences are done, and let me show what's going on. So if I'm moving, holding down the shift key and panning this thing around, by the way, this is the pan as well, so you can use this pan on here. Now, when I'm starting rotation, it rotates around itself, which was pretty useful. The other thing is about the zoom. So as you see, where the cursor is at, this is where the zoom will perform. So if I want to zoom on here, that zooms up there. If I want to zoom on this particular corner, I place my cursor there and I can zoom in. Alright, this is quite an awesome thing. Now, what else? The cube is great. By the way, left click is selecting the cube. And here we are now in box selection mode, which was a cool mode. So I can click on it, it highlights in orange. This is the color of selection. It has different shades, but first thing first. So once it is selected, we can delete this guy. It's not really meaningful to have a cube in the center. Great, but not really meaningful. So what I will do, I will hit X. And X is a kind of a pop-up menu for delete. You can use the delete button, but this X feature will give you more opportunities later on. So please, it's a good idea to remember that. All right, so that's the X hotkey. Now we are empty, nothing else. But we still have a few things. First, we have this dot in the center. This is called the 3D cursor. We will talk about this later on in details, but right away, just leave it as it is. This is kind of marks the center of creation. And we have a couple objects, we have a collection, and we have camera, we have a light source. These are good things to set up your scene, and by default, these are added to your scene. But now we don't have any mesh. So we need to add a mesh, but yeah, I can click on here, add mesh, and I will create a monkey. But not this way. Here's another way. Shift A is to add, M is to mesh type, and another M. Can you see how this is highlighted with an underscore? So this is another M, monkey, and I'm hitting the M, and there we go. We have this beautiful monkey. We know nothing about this monkey. She is Suzanne, but here's this add monkey script coming up. And let me press function key 9. Function key 9 is actually to here to make it more visible. There's actually a kind of a dialog where you can make your initial setup of the model. All right, this one's only active when you are creating the model. So right away when you are created and it's just appearing on the scene, you can press F9, or you can come in here and press this button. If you press F9, it will pop up at your cursor and it can help. So you don't want to always go back and forth here. All right, so function key 9, and we can adjust the size. This is 2 meters. It's huge. All right, so it's huge. I will leave it as it is now, but this is one thing you should know, that you can adjust the size right away. Sometimes we have more parameters depending on the object we are creating, and this has just disappeared, but here we are. Okay, we have some similar items about the location of this guy. Now, the reason I wanted to create this monkey is because it's much easier to understand which one is the front, which one is the back, and all the axis and all the fancy things we have to learn about 3D. Alright, so the first thing, now we know how to navigate. We know this bar. We have made a couple of changes, orbiting around the object. Zoom is now sensing the position of the 3D mouse, so that one is a great thing. But we don't know much about the whole interface and the layout, what we see. Okay, so in the top area we have modeling, sculpting, UV editing, texture paint, and so many features. Shading needs some time to load. In this case, okay, so this is not adjusted and not set. We have animation. Here's this camera view, rendering, compositing, geometry nodes, so we can add a lot of different features, and of course we can do some scripting. These are not written in stone. You can adjust them, and I will show what to do. But the first thing you have to understand that we have this kind of a concept. If you're using control and page down, for example, you can walk up and down in between these stuffs. The other thing what you can do is there is a control tab. This is a pie menu. Okay, so if you haven't seen pie menu before, it's like it looks like a pie, like it is a kind of a wheel with the spokes, so you can channel and target one or another mode. So for example, if I want to switch this to edit mode, now I can adjust the ingredients of this object, like vertices, edges, and faces, but later on we will discuss this a little bit more. Or for example, in this case, we can use the tab button. The tab button is going back and forth between object mode and edit mode. Okay, so the main difference, what you see here, and I like to keep this open, so when I'm pressing tab, it will actually showing the shorter version, and that's a hint that you are in object mode, or you can read it here, or you can tab, and this is edit mode. All right, so there we are. By the way, if you accidentally press a button, I like to discuss shortcut keys in Blender, because there's situations when you just accidentally press something and you don't know what happened. So there's not much indicators. We have a couple indicators here, but not many. If you press T, for example, that hides away the toolbar. But if something happens, you can always see these little arrows, so you can bring them back. Here's a little arrow. The hotkey for that is N. Right? This will give you the transform, so you can adjust some things depending on your active tool, and etc. If you have some add-ons, sometimes those add-ons creating further tabs around here. Okay, but more about handling the scene. So let me close this sidebar here. So a couple things. These are the main tools that you have, that you see. So these are the workflow related layouts, and this is the basic menu to operate on the actual object mode or edit mode, or etc. So these are the commands, where you can find the commands and creating options. Here's a timeline for the animation, of course. This is called Outliner. Now, Outliner is kind of a manager. So it's way more than just the directory of your items. It's actually having more knowledge about your objects. So you can click on the settings, and then it will switch to those. So here example, here's Suzanne. We have Suzanne now, and we can make further adjustments. Here's the location about Suzanne. So for example, if you don't like to use this little item with a position, this is what you can use as well. So I can transform Suzanne by using this drag. Okay, we can give it a try to reset. It should work, but it's not working all the time on my computer. Don't know the reason why, but this is one way to reset. So if you're adjusting these values and now you're off center, you can always go here, hover over, and press backspace, and ta-da, it resets the values. Okay, now, so going further, we can resize these. So what does it mean? If you grab a corner, you can actually create a new frame, for example, or you can drag this one and extend, and now it's gone. All right, so I've just grabbed a corner, pulled it, it duplicates the whole stuff, and I can drag and just erase that. One thing that I usually do, not all the time, but just giving an idea how to use this, is I'm not using the timeline when I'm modeling, so it's not really that much handy. So, and eats up space. The other thing is, can you see now it's a little bit cleaner, so when you are modeling, it can help a lot in the beginning phases that you can see and read the tips, the tool tips that you can find here. Okay, and for example, the other thing that I like to do with the outliner, I divide this here and eat this up with the outliner. And every corner there is a button, and you can choose what you want to see as a work window. And there are hotkeys all around. So if I'm pressing like Shift Function key 9, that is actually the hotkey for the outliner. So I can just create the outliner and separate it there. Okay, and that helps a lot. And if you don't need to close it, but you can drag, for example, drag this slide, and if you want to go and adjust something and you have plenty of items, it's really handy to do this. All right, let me drag them. The other thing is that may be helpful if you're holding down Shift key and tap on a corner and drag, and that will actually create a floater. Now, what's the benefit of having a floater? If you have two monitors, which one is, I highly suggest, if you can, buy a used monitor even, to plug it in and use multiple monitors, not just one, especially in 3D, because it's kind of saves you a lifetime in work. But what I do like in floaters is that you can scale them down, and now it's much more compact. So I can even use this, cover this up, and now I have this little floater. So it's still there, but it's not consuming that much space. All right. Okay. This one's good for renaming and organizing your stuff, but right away we don't worry about this, and I will just bring it back and make this active and Shift Function key 9, and this is kind of a original way. If you forget about this, what corner, what not, you can always go to the divider and press right click, and you have a vertical split, horizontal split, join, swap. So it works the same way, but don't forget, just go in here and pick the window you want to actually see outliner, Shift F9. Okay, so there we go. Now we have Suzanne here, and we have adjusted the navigation. So now we are rotating around Suzanne, and we can move around things. All right, and I don't know exactly Suzanne's size, so let me open this up and look for the size. Right, yeah, that's good. Let me undo this. And one thing that could be really handy and could be a little bit annoying. So here's this item, and if you want to zoom in automatically to make sure that it fits to the scene, or you lose something, for example, you don't know where your light is, and you select your light in the outliner, and you want to focus, zoom, and make that in center, you have a hotkey that is the comma hotkey in the numpad. So the numpad is, the numbers and the side of the keyboard if you have that particular part of your keyboard. And this is the numpad dot that actually is a command of fit. But we can find this in a view mode, and this is called frame selected. This is the numpad dot. But the problem is you have to lift off your hand from the mouse and use this button, and this is just a waste of time. Or if you're left-handed, right-handed, you have to reach across your keyboard. So what I do like is I like to change the hotkey. Now this is time to learn how to change a hotkey. We are using the default hotkeys here. No industry standard, no 3ds Max, no Maya. I think those are, you can lose more on the go if you try to force Blender to behave a certain way. I think it's much easier if you keep at it and use the original hotkeys and maybe make minor changes, but it's better to learn and evolve with Blender than try to forcing this kit. It will not bend. Okay, so frame selected and right click, and here's the trick. We have change shortcut. So to change shortcut, the shortcut I like to use is Shift F. And as you see, the frame selected now is probably it's because of ZBrush. So Shift F. So when I'm selecting a monkey, for example here, and pressing Shift F, I will zoom in and rotate around, and now everything is back to normal, so I can move easily. Sometimes the virtual camera is just a little bit, something is off. You feel the rotation or moving is not perfectly well. So anytime you can press Shift F, or the original hotkey is the numpad 0. Now I've changed that so it won't work anymore, but Shift F working for me. Okay, now, so we have some ideas about the UI. We have some ideas about this range. So we can do more about here later on as we will start manipulating a few things. But this is kind of a general starting knowledge that we need to get on board. Okay, so let me talk about the basic transformations. So here's this item, and we have, if you don't want to get confused and you want the easiest visual way to navigate and manipulate items, you need to press Shift and spacebar, and it will bring you a selection. And if you press T again, it will give you this transform gizmo. Now this transform gizmo is very similar like you have in ZBrush. It's a great little tool. I really like it, especially if you want to move details and you don't exactly know what to do, and it gives you some hint. Okay, this is this direction, this is that direction. So but the problem is, I will tell you what's the difference between the grab mode and the transformation mode like this. So whenever you are selecting a specific axis, you can move along that axis. So it's fairly easy if you do that. You can also rotate around, and you can also tilt this in all directions. You can scale on one direction. All right, so that's kind of a good way to alter the look of the basic model. And what else can you see? Let me hold down this, and please look at this area on the top. That area. Okay, just bring it back. Okay, just zoom in. There's another hotkey for recentering the model and reset the values, but we will keep it a little bit later. So what I wanted to show you in the top left corner, so please keep an eye on there. When I start rotating this guy, it shows the values. Now it's not really the best idea. I prefer when the actual numbers are showing up on the screen in the middle or somewhere close to Gizmo, but it is there and it's working great. So keep an eye on there. Now when I'm starting rotation, All right, let me reset this. Okay, let me reset this. To reset, if I'm pressing Alt R is resetting the rotation. If I'm pressing Alt S, it will reset scale, and if I'm pressing Alt G, it will reset the movement. All right, so these are the 3 resets for the basic transformation. So if I move it away, I can press Alt G and it snaps back where it was created. Okay, this was good. We can erase this function over, so once we are past the modeling phase of something, of course you don't want to keep the original position all the time, but this is good. For example, you want to model on teeth and move the way the head. The teeth will stay there, and when you're done with the teeth, you can select the head again and press Shift G and it will snap back to the original. So this is giving you an idea why do we like it a lot. Okay, so here we are. And further modes about rotation. So when I'm starting, for example, rotating, I start rotating and the values are not full numbers. So what does it mean? If you're holding down Control, you can actually rotate by 5-degree incrementals, which one is a great thing. And what I want to emphasize here is please keep in mind that in Blender, if you are using Shift or Control or Alt, these 3 buttons will 90% will give you an altered version of something. So keep that in mind. If you are experimenting Blender on your own and you're using a tool, give it a try and press Control and Shift. Can you see the bottom here? Please, when I'm activating this, look at the bottom. Can you see how many options we have? These are all hints. Okay, so all the hotkeys, what you can do if you're using Control, if you're using Shift, what happens. Okay, so this is a ton of information. So now again, I'm holding Control, and that is about 5-degree incrementals. I'm holding the Shift, and that is like a micro adjustment. Right, very subtle adjustment. If I'm combining Control and Shift, it will actually rotate with 1-degree incrementals. Okay, so it adds power. Right, power is joint, so Control is incremental and Shift is a fine adjustment. So in combination, it will be a little bit more accurate. All right, this same thing happens with move. So I'm holding the move and holding the Control, it will move on the grid steps. So what does it mean? We have this head is about 2.5 meters, so that actually it looks like this one square here, it's 1 square meters. So when I'm using Control, it actually snaps to 1 meters. If the logic is true, if I'm holding down Shift key, it may go with 10 centimeter. Yeah, 10 centimeters. All right, and you don't have to be shy. Can you see how my cursor is going through the scene up and down? All right, this is a feature that was very similar to 3ds Max, and it's really enjoyable. You don't have to stop at the top, you can just drag all across. Okay, and Shift G, Alt G to reset the model, Shift F because I've just changed the hotkeys, so Shift F is working. But don't forget numpad dot frame your model. Okay, so that is about transformation. Something that we should address, that what's the main difference between this type of transformation and the G, grab, R, rotate, and S scale. First, let me start with G. So here's this gizmo. If I want to move, I have to actually grab the cursor, grab the arrows. But if I'm pressing G, it will instantly set me on move mode, and it doesn't matter where my cursor is, so I can save some time. The other thing is we have these little, we have these cross lines, green and red, and as you see the green, so if you have a lows track, the green is always indicated, and that's the Y, the red one is usually X, and the blue one is usually Z, that's the top. So imagine that we have a table and we can move sideways on the table, that's X, and front and back, that's Y, and up and down, ding ding ding, head banging, and that is Z. But right now, what we'll do, can you see these values? If you don't see it, you can use N to show this. So let me click, and now N will work, and G. So I'm in move mode now, so I can't really bring this table when I'm already in grab mode. So what it means, everything is changing. Now I can restrict these. So if I'm pressing Z, for example, now only up and down. Or if I'm pressing X, that's the horizontal movement, and as you see, the value is changing. If I'm pressing Y, it's going back and forth. It takes time to get used to this, and it's weird at first, okay, but it works, okay. So what you have to keep in mind that X, Y, Z, and it helps a lot. We have multiple, there's another easier way. So if you don't know yet, you can actually press G and use the middle mouse button, and then you can snap to one of the axes, for example on a red X, or on a green one, or even the other axis, the Z axis. Alright, so that's another way. I like to use the middle mouse, sorry, the XYZ hotkeys. So I'm pressing G and for example Z, it's up and down. Or if you want to move on a plane, like on a planner, for example, you want to move on the desktop, you can actually create a restriction. So let me set it to 0 and press G, and I don't want to move it on the Z axis. I want to move it on the X and Y axis simultaneously, like on a planar surface. So I'm using Shift Z, and that is actually restricting the Z axis. Can you see it tries, it's 0, minus 0, minus 0, but I'm sticking to the desktop, okay? So if the axis you want to restrict is the Y axis, so you don't want to move front and back, and like you want to move this figure on the wall, you can press G and Shift Y, and now you are moving on a wall, okay? These are really useful stuffs, but if you get lost and you want to go slow, what you can do is, let me press Alt G to reset. As there's a hotkey for 4 views. So let me press N, transform closed. Sorry, Control Alt Q. Yeah, I don't use this too much. There we are. So now we can select actually the model, and you can move it in this view. You can move it up and down, and if you're moving in these, you could be sure that it's not altered. Okay, so you can't accidentally rotate this viewport. In other softwares, it could be really a kind of an issue that these views could rotate around, but these are much more like for feedback. So you have this main window. This is the perspective where you can inspect everything, and these are great for check and see for yourself that if everything is fine. Shift F to zoom in. So it works nicely, but you can move away from these viewports. All right, if you're clicking on these icons, this one will update. All right, so Control Alt and Q, going back, move it away, Shift F, and there we go. So this is about transformation. Yeah, time to go forward. What we have to talk about, you know already about scale a lot, sorry, the move a lot, but we have scale as well. So let me go and press W, and pressing W a couple of times, and I'm using tweak mode now. This is, if I'm holding down the left mouse button, we have these selection methods. So right now it's tweak. I've changed it to get rid of the 3D gizmo, and here we are about scale. So I'm pressing S, and that is the scale. If you use it right away, that's the default uniform scale, which was great. So it scales up and down. What you need to know that when you are scaling a model, you are altering a little bit that model in a technical way. Okay, it will be really important. And what you need to know about Blender, it's not as forgiving as other softwares. when you are start creating something, you have to reset everything in order to be able to work and apply multiple modifiers in many cases. And especially in animation, you have to reset all the meshes. That's true for every software. But in Blender, right away, once you have the foundational base, usually you perform a kind of a reset to get rid of some data. I will explain what's going on with this. So this is scaling up, and if I'm pressing S and I'm pressing Z, for example, that means that will just scale up and down on the Z-axis. If I'm using the X, it will scale sideways. That's kind of a great thing. All right, so we can do these easily. Okay, now let me go back and just undo a couple of things. And this is scaled up a little bit, so let me open up the N and using scale. And as you see, as I'm using the scale, the dimensions are updating. But the problem is that these dimensions are just updated by the scale, but mathematically the original object was something different in size. So for this reason, whenever you are creating something, usually you have to reset. The way to reset is we're pressing Ctrl A, it's apply, and we have these options: location, rotation, scale, all transforms, or rotation and scale. So usually you don't want to reset location and rotation right away, but you should reset scale if you have scaled your model. That's a good idea because some of the modifiers will not work. We are not there yet with the modifiers, but we're fairly close. Okay, so I will leave it as it is now, and talk about something else, like how to set up a scene. Okay, so we know these are the outliners, we have some menus, we have workspaces, we have toolbar on the side, we have a kind of a feedback for transformation, and we have 3D viewport, and we can change the 3D viewport by Control Alt and Q, and going back and forth, Control Alt and Q. And when you're clicking on a model, that will be selected, and you can also select by clicking on the name. And when you are clicking on the name, it will update in the sidebar, so it will give you a feedback. And as you see, it's content aware, so if it's a camera, there will be a camera option. If there's a light, there's no camera option, there's a light button. If there's Suzanne, there's something else there. Okay, so it's depending on what you have. And these are the specific icons that can help you to understand what we see. All right, so waiting for the next. Okay, so before we start and moving on, first thing first, I will create, and this is the best idea to do, is if you read the values of our Suzanne head, this is a huge head. Okay, it's not realistic. It's not really a big issue if you just want to tinker around and test the things. But the problem is when you want to simulate, create lights, adding physics, whatever, it can become a problem. And the other thing is, if you're working in a team and others are working with other models and working on a scene and lighting, etc., it's hard to harmonize the work. It's hard to work as a team if the units are off for everyone. And scaling is an option, but it's not a good idea once you have bones and once you have skinning and everything around and light set. Scaling is not really a good idea to go. So it's better if you start early. But in general, the first thing that you want to do is to adjust the system that for the units and all the other parts. So if you are working as a team, it's a good idea to keep your stuff and organized and make sure that the units are same for everyone. And in the scene properties area, so scene properties, units, there we go. We have unit scale, and that's fine, it's 1, which was great, but the length is actually set to meters. So I will set this to centimeters, right? That's great. But the problem is that just because you adjusted the length, it's not a problem, but you have to know about this. So when the length is set to centimeters, if I'm selecting this head, open up N, the values are converted. Okay, so nothing really, the actual model is the same size, which one could be good, but just you have to keep it in mind. It's not scaling your scene. It is just measuring differently with a different unit, but it's the same size. So we will start over, but before we will start over and create a initial starting file, we need to adjust one more thing. So here at the viewport overlays, we have something called scale. So guides scale, and this is to set the floor, and this floor scale is actually the resolution of the grid. All right, so it's not really a telling name, that scale, it's actually grid resolution. And when you start adjusting, you can see how the grid is shrinking. Okay, so 1 is always 1 meters. Always 1 meters. Even if you're set it to centimeters, it's 1 meters. Usually 1 meters is kind of a generic unit in other softwares. Here it's just meters, but generic unit. And usually it's common for if you are working cross-platform. So scale is set to be 0.1 is 10 centimeters, 0.01 is 1 centimeter. So now we have these little grids in 1 centimeter size. Okay, so here we are, it's 0.01, and that is great. Okay, the dimensions of this head is huge, so I'm pressing S, scaling it down, and this is still pretty large. I'm pressing S again, and watch for the values. And sometimes you cannot really scale it once, so you have to scale in steps, or you can type in and adjust the size, or you can go in and resize and use these values, and that's it. Now, one thing that you need to know about this values, so let me crank this up. Can you see what's the problem? Everything, it's only working on one axis, so only the x-axis. Let me undo this, scale, and use this value. I'm holding the left mouse button, and this is a little bit of a neat trick. Holding the left mouse button, dragging, and moving the left mouse button. I'm still holding the left mouse button. Can you see? Simultaneously adjusting the 3 sliders. All right, that's a good thing to know of. Okay, another thing when you are dealing with values is if you are coming in, for example, it's 36 centimeters. But if I'm just typing in like 360 millimeters and hit enter, it calculates between units. So if I'm pointing from 0.35 meters, hit enter, it's 36 centimeters. So it's back and forth. If I'm typing in here 30 centimeters plus 6, hit enter, 36. Okay, so basic arithmetic operations are presented. You can use these. It's quite a good thing. If you're just hovering over these values, if you press Ctrl C, it will copy, and if you press Ctrl V, it will paste on a different location. So if you have to work accurately, or you have to match something and the sizes are similar, let me undo this because it all looks odd. This is a neat little thing. Okay, I want to reset this guy and set this in a center position, so I'm pressing Alt J, Shift F to zoom in, and there we go. This is now a kind of a relative, believable sized head. We have centimeters. We have normal units. So if I'm pressing G and moving away, and for example moving on the Z-axis and holding down Control, I can move it up and down by 1 centimeters. And if you see at the top left, it will tell me, okay, I just moved away because of presenting. So let me press Alt J, and this is how it works. This scene should be our basic starting scene, and we can explore more on the go. All right, to save, we'll hit Ctrl S, and it will bring the dialog where to save, saving on a desktop, and I will save it to my Suzanne and 000, and I will explain just in a second why I do this. So 000 and save Blender file, hit Blender enter and Blender file, and here's the name. Now the reason I do this is it's better safe than sorry. So every time you save a file, this is now a setup file, and this is why it's the 001. This is the first with the basic settings. Right away I like to go and save another file, save as, or Control Shift S, that's the save as function, and I'm pressing, it's calling in red because it's an existing file. I'm pressing plus, and it will recognize that we have these numbers and adds one value because it's plus. And now I save another file. Okay, so if I mess up something, I will always go back to the first one. So not just saving the recent model you have, open a new file and progress with that one, so you can keep your file. By the way, there's automatic save, and there's quite a lot of undos. So in the edit mode we have undos, and there's not yet, but usually you can adjust the undos in the preferences as well. Okay, so there we go. This is the starting file to progress and model the task. All right, so thank you. That's it for now, and we will move on forward.